Hello, and welcome to Discover Stories on Reimagined Radio. I'm your host, Sean Burdett, intern with the Vancouver Adapted Music Society. Today on the show, we have Bryce Clarke, detective with the Edmonton Police Services. Bryce, thank you so much for coming on today. How's it going?
Oh, thanks for having me. It's going all right. Winter is definitely set in here in Alberta, and it's although it's only 4 o'clock our time, the sun is already going down and it's starting to get dark. So it's one of the things I absolutely hate about winter.
I don't know what it is, but I swear it's getting darker this year than it usually
I
is.
think I agree with you.
Yeah. So just starting off here, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, you bet. I'm 49 years old, and I had my accident in 2001, August 26, 2001 to be exact. So this year is actually my 20th year of being a quadriplegic or being disabled. I, growing up, my dad was a police officer with Calgary City Police, and ever since I was just a small boy, uh, I've always wanted to be a police officer, and so my whole life kind of was built to guide me towards that. Where I went to school, after high school, took criminology, uh, whatnot, and yeah, so I got on the Edmonton Police Service February 23rd, 1998, and it was a dream come true.
Prior to your accident, could you tell us a little bit about your role on the force?
Yeah, you bet. As I said, I started February 23rd, 98, and I was in class. So when anybody gets hired onto a municipal police service in Canada, you go to class. You start where they just teach you all the basics of law and uh, ethical situations. Definitely, we do a lot of driver training, personal safety, all that stuff. So you're training and learning what it means to be a police officer, what it's going to take, and then you go out into the field where you're with a training officer, so you actually learn in the situations, kind of thing. Nobody, the public doesn't know you're just training. They think they view you as a regular police officer. So I did that and graduated in October, and then joined the South Side um, Patrol Division, I guess, and was working out of a patrol car for the first couple of years, and I got right into gang investigations, drug investigations. I really enjoyed those. I enjoyed dealing with the kids that got involved in gangs and whatnot. And so I started actually doing undercover work, um, and was in a plainclothes uh, role when the Canada Day riots happened on July 1st of 2001. Because of that, so what it was is basically on White Ave in Edmonton, which is it's basically a street where both sides of the street for a number of blocks is just bar after bar, tavern after tavern. And it erupted into a huge riot where people were looting stores, flipping vehicles, lighting fires, all that. And so all the specialized units, such as mine, were seconded up to White Ave and worked in a uniform role with the beat officers up there. And it was great. It was a good summer. It was very stressful. Everybody was on edge. Every weekend, it was another riot could happen. But thankfully, it didn't. And that ended on August 25th, was the start of my last shift, which ended early morning on August 26th.
And if I'm correct, this was close to the time when you had your accident, right?
That is the night or the morning of my accident was August 26th. I had said, because we were all going back to our respective units, I said to all the guys and girls that we were working together for the whole summer. I said, come on back to my place. I've got a hot tub, got a barbecue, swimming pool. Let's have a couple of drinks to celebrate a successful summer. And away we go. So there was about 12 guys that came back, 12 or 13 guys that came back, and we had a few pops, had a barbecue, and I did something that I had done 1,000 times, and that was I stood up on the railing of my deck and I dove into the swimming pool below. And at that time, I can remember it extremely vividly, and that was I dove into the pool, and all I heard was a loud crack, and I had no idea what happened. I didn't feel any pain, but I was laying face down in the water, and I could hear I was floating on the top, and I could hear the guys laughing and yelling my name and saying, "Clarke, get up, quit joking around, blah blah blah." And that's the last thing I remember. Um, I woke up about a week later in the University of Alberta Hospital intensive care unit. I couldn't talk because I'd been intubated, so I had a breathing tube in my throat. And the doctors quickly told me that I had broken my neck and I was paralyzed from the neck down. They said that I would never work again. I would never walk again. I would never be a productive member of society, that I'd always have to rely on somebody else. And yeah, very negative, very bleak uh, future from that point on, according to the hospital staff. And yeah, and so I had to wrap my head around uh, all of those things.
What was it like having to hear that from the hospital staff?
It was, I mean, it's hard to explain. I mean, it's hard to put into words. To be told that life as you know it is over. Like prior to my accident, I'd never heard of the term quadriplegic. I if asked, I probably wouldn't have even known what paraplegic was. I'd never had exposure to people with disabilities other than the odd passerby observation type thing. So for me, it was, what does this mean? What are the, like, are what they telling me true? I'm going to be not able to move from the neck down, and quickly realized also. I mean, they said, there's no quadriplegic police officers anywhere in the world. You can't get into a patrol car. You can't chase down bad guys anymore. And I think that was probably the hardest part to digest. It had been my lifelong dream, and I'd only been doing it for a little over 3.5 years. So yeah, the negativity was really hard to take, but I was so lucky because um, I had such great support in all the guys and girls that I worked with. Um, kept supporting me and telling me, they're there. Even the chief of police at the time, a guy by the name of Bob Wazilishin, and my direct supervisor, not direct, but the superintendent who was in charge of South Division where I worked. They came to see me when I was in the ICU and I had a breathing tube still. And they told me, they said, we don't know what the outcome is going to be with you, but no matter what, you have a job. You have something to come to when you're ready. And that meant a lot to me. That was huge. That was the motivation that I kind of needed.
Wow. Um, so, what was life for you like once you had been discharged? Um, in terms of just getting back on the force, getting to where you were now?
You know what? I think anybody that's had a similar situation or been in a life altering accident, especially one that affects your mobility. Um, the hospital staff, even though they're negative, they're great, right? They're there to assist. They're there to help. And as much as they tried to prepare me for life in a wheelchair or life with a disability, uh, there's only so much that people in the hospital can do. After the university, I was discharged. I went to the Glenrose, which is a rehabilitation hospital. So I got discharged from the university hospital in October and was put into the Glenrose, and I stayed there until February 14th, actually Valentine's Day of 2002. And when I came out of the Glenrose, when I was fully discharged and I'm ready to go home, life kind of smacks you right in the face. And, you don't realize that some of the places you've been to before and that you want to go to, you can't because there's steps to get in. Um, for me, I mean, the house, the acreage that I lived on, I was told by doctors, well, you can't live on an acreage anymore. You're in a wheelchair. You can't, you can't do the stuff around there. And for me, I mean, I grew up on a farm. I grew up outside of the city. Uh, the only time I ever lived in the city was when I went to college. So that was, a huge realization for me. And what I had to do is renovate the house. So with the support of guys and girls at work, they raised a bunch of money for me, and we were able to renovate the house to get it somewhat wheelchair accessible. But there was still, a lot of difficulties, and adjusting life to being in a wheelchair. Not only wasn't it easy, but it was also extremely expensive. Uh, so, all of those things contributed to dark days, hard days. But again, leaning on the people around me, my friends, my family, and coworkers, uh, I was able to still see that life isn't over after a spinal cord injury. There can still be life. And for me, the biggest motivating factor to get past some of these obstacles was so that I could return to work. Again, nobody at work or even myself knew what that would entail. Um, but I knew I had to do something. So in August of 2003, uh, I had an opportunity to start um, volunteering, I call it, because I was on long term disability. So I went in to police headquarters, and the gang unit guys who knew me because I had done undercover work with them, and they knew I really enjoyed that kind of work. They brought me in, and I started helping them with behind the scenes stuff, making gang books for guys on the street. So, who's in a gang? What gang are they in? What are they doing with it? That kind of stuff. A lot of what we call intelligence work. And that started evolving for me, where then uh, I started doing gang presentations, first compiling presentations for the other guys to go and do them. But then it was brought up, well, why can't you do them? And I was like, I can try. Some of the venues weren't wheelchair accessible, but the ones that were are schools, um, uh, community community stations, different different commercial places that hold community group meetings, stuff like that. So I started going out and doing these gang presentations, and more doors and more opportunities started to open up uh, with the realization that being a police officer is a lot more than just riding in a patrol car and you know answering calls that are being placed by the public. There's a lot of good police work that happens behind the scenes.
No, absolutely. You give a long list of all these duties, and as you said yourself, there's so many tasks involved with becoming an officer. It's not just being in a patrol car. What would you say was like your favorite type of work in this new role that you had with the force?
That's a great question, and it's a kind of a funny one. In that, one thing that we learned when I was doing the gang presentations, most especially the kids that were what we called at-risk youth. So they had direct exposure to gangs and organized crime, or they were already on the peripheral, whether they were selling, uh, marijuana before it was legal, like we're talking 20 years ago. So if they started just selling that, or they were, hanging around these gangs, they had no idea that I was a police officer. Um, a lot of people that I did presentations for actually thought that I was a gang member, a former gang member that had been shot, and was now speaking out about, life in a gang is hard and everything, because those are the presentations I was doing, is to try and deter kids, deter youth from getting involved in the gang life or drug life. And so when we realized that, it was kind of like, well, wait a sec, what kind of opportunities could this present? And so the idea was, well, I could definitely go on the street and in an undercover capacity, I could buy drugs. I could do surveillance and be out where, if I'm strolling down a sidewalk uh, and the bad guys that we're targeting are out there, they're not going to think I'm a police officer. Whereas in some of the areas we were, if there was a clean cut Caucasian guy walking down that was dressed all right, they would be very suspicious that, oh, he's got to be a cop or something. But me and Will, they had no second thoughts. So I developed what they call an SOP, which is Standard Operational Plan, to target drug dealers and gang members that were attending our annual fair or annual, it was called the Capital X. So it was kind of like the Calgary Stampede without the big rodeo and all that, right? It was just the exhibition, all the rides, the fairgrounds. So for years, they'd had trouble with gang members and drug dealers and criminals attending the grounds, just strictly to do their business and wreak havoc. And unfortunately, there would be occasions when rival groups would meet on the fairgrounds, and then big fights or shootings or whatever would occur. And you can imagine those occurring in an immense closed area with lots of regular public. The the danger to innocent bystanders was enormous. So, as I said, I developed an SOP where I would use my wheelchair, my disability, for an advantage. And we had my wheelchair all wired up, so it was fixed with a radio. and a microphone, and I could talk to all the other uniformed and plainclothes officers that were on the grounds. And I would target known drug dealers or known gang members that were on the fairgrounds. And I would follow them and get close enough to them to where I could hear what they're talking about with their buddies, uh, and realize if they were actually there to enjoy the fair, or are they there for nefarious purposes, selling drugs, recruiting gang members, uh, recruiting smaller kids to be drug dealers. And it didn't take long to find out, yeah, they're there for the wrong reasons. So I would follow them around, and once we had enough evidence to say, uh, okay, they're not here for good purpose, let's just kick them out because it's a private event. We're able to do that with minimal amount of trouble. So I would back away, key the microphone on my chair, and just tell the guys, okay, yeah, they're here doing business and recruiting members. So go ahead, go up, and I'd give them a description, and they'd go and grab the guys, escort them off the grounds, and kick them off and issue them a notice of trespass that they're not allowed to come back until the next year, kind of thing. And it worked great. Worked great for like 3 years running. We were super successful. We avoided a lot of um, possible dangerous incidents occurring on the grounds uh, until the very last day of the Capital X in 2009. And that's when I targeted, there was a well-known Hell's Angel member that was on the grounds. He had his colors on his jacket, his vest. And he was hanging around with, I think there was 4 or 5 others. They weren't all wearing colors or anything, but so I thought, well, I might as well see what they're up to. So I hung around them, and I'm aware that they're a very complex organization. They are very savvy in their counter surveillance. And they're a dangerous group of guys. But I thought, I've done this enough that we could do this. So sure enough, I saddled up close enough to them, realized that they were there for the wrong reasons, backed away and called in the guys to remove them. And as our members came in, both uniform and plain clothes, I backed away, but I was honestly watching everything that was going on, and I hadn't backed away enough. And the next thing I know, a extremely large, uh, heavily tattooed man is coming directly at me, and he's walking quite quickly, and he's pointing his finger, and he's yelling at me that I'm an effing pig, and I'm the one that's responsible for all of his friends getting kicked off. And uh, he wants to do me harm. And I'm looking at him and I'm realizing, oh boy, I missed this. So I had to think of something to do, and I wasn't about to try and fight him. So I clicked my mic, and so everybody around could hear him yelling at me. And I began yelling back. And I, right away confronted, I said, how could I be a cop? I'm paralyzed from the neck down. Like, what kind of idiot are you? I'm the furthest thing from a police officer than anything. I'm here just enjoying the atmosphere. And anyways, it was enough for him to kind of stop and give his head a shake and hesitate, that the guys were able to zoom in, grab him, and kind of include him with the group that was already being escorted off the grounds. And I was able to maintain my cover and slide away to safety. And it was all good. Everybody, we were all happy with the way it turned out. I wasn't hurt. Um, Heck, it was a little exciting at the time. Uh, but when I got back to headquarters, the executives or the people that make the decisions uh, heard about it and realized the potential for me to be injured or compromised uh, was huge. And so that was the last undercover scenario that I was able to do. That was definitely the funnest, and I still relive that every time I tell the story. I'm reliving it. So
Absolutely. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, this undercover work had to stop. But what role did you take on after that within the force?
after that happened and realized that undercover work wasn't necessarily in the cards, which yeah, it was a devastating pill to swallow, so to speak. But at the same time, uh, undercover work doesn't happen all the time. You're not always constantly doing it. So it comes up when the opportunity presents itself. So I had always been looking for other uh, opportunities, other jobs that I could do. And so when I went back, uh, into getting it there, uh, even before this operation in 2009, I had started helping with uh, investigations. So ongoing investigations where we would have, we'd be doing a wiretap on gang members or organized crimes phones. So I would go up into, we call it the wire room, where they're recording all these, and a police officer has to listen to each and every call to determine, is there evidentiary value there? What is the intent of the call? Are they planning something bigger? Is it imminently danger? Are they planning a hit on somebody right there? And then you have to direct the police officers on the street that are part of this investigation um, to the right targets and all that. So I started doing that, which was extremely interesting and again very exciting because things would happen where over the phone lines they'd be using their lingo to say that they're now transporting a package, and that's usually their drugs or weapons or whatever. And so we'd be able to pinpoint where they are and get the other officers over to arrest them, and usually seize the drugs or weapons. So it was great, and I started helping out with search warrants. Started helping out, so the doors started opening that Bryce's potential uh, was increasing. I was gaining a reputation for still being able to be a thorough investigator. And with that, as the doors opened, it became quite apparent, as I had said to you before, that I was only volunteering. Well, we were able to put enough of my skill sets together and enough tasks that I could do, where finally in February of 2009, I became a full time employee again as a sworn police officer. I I thought I was the first quadriplegic police officer in Canada. But I realized, and it wasn't until like 3 years later, so I felt horrible. An article went out about me in the Globe and Mail where it stated I was the first and only quadriplegic police officer. When I got an email a week after that article came out from a guy, Pat Hanlon in Ontario, uh, gave me an email and said, "Hey, congratulations on the article. Congratulations on everything that you're doing. But just to let you know, I had a similar accident to yours, and I've been working with the OPP since like in the 90s kind of thing." And I was like, oh gosh. I wrote him back and I just said how sorry I was. I didn't mean to take any wind out of his sail. And, I quickly, the Globe and Mail was great. That they printed a correction that there was another officer in Ontario. And I kind of gave kudos to him being the first. But it was neat. The two of us could connect, being there was only two quadriplegic police officers in all of Canada. And yeah, so to come back full time was so special. And it developed uh, into so much where shortly after I was asked if I wanted to go to homicide section. And that had been my dream even before my accident. My dad was a homicide detective. And, I always knew at some point in my career that's where I wanted to go. And so I went in there in April, I think, of 2010. And it was the best job. It was extremely exciting as well. I started off doing cold case or historical files, and it was everything that if someone could put in what their dream job was, this was mine. And it was dusting off, 20-year-old files and going through all the investigations and looking for new evidence, resubmitting forensic evidence. Like it was almost like it was designed for me, designed for somebody in my kind of situation where I can analyze great, but I can't, get to a scene, or I can't, do the street work. Well, this was right up that alley. So yeah, I ended up staying in homicide until right up until 2017. So for over 7 years, and it was just a great time, just a lot.
Wow. And what does your work consist of now?
So after I left homicide, well, I became an acting detective in homicide, and very fortunately, that's kind of stuck with me. I've been able to work in a promoted rank since 2010. I'm still trying to become an actual detective, not an acting, um, but that's part of the police world that is they're not quite up to speed yet, like a lot of the world, with um, equity and diversity and whatnot. And so part of my quest right now with the police service is doing just that, is getting that equity and diversity um, and inclusion brought in where I can be held at the same level as everybody else. And so I sit on the Chiefs Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, where we're looking at all forms of those meetings, the equity, the diversity, and the inclusion part, and seeing how we can better our workplace by leading by example. And so hopefully in the near future, I can achieve and lose the acting part, and we'll go from there. I am currently what I do is when I left homicide, I was asked to go downtown to a patrol division, and I developed targets. So I'd be made aware of guys that were out of jail, but they had court appointed conditions to follow. And so I'd be made aware of those guys, and I would pick the worst of the worst. So newly released sex offenders, newly released people that had committed murder, and all those. And I would find out where they were staying, and I would send a team of officers to go and ensure that they were following those conditions. And again, it was work that was right up my alley. I could easily do it from my desk or partly from home. And I became quite inept at developing targets for other guys and sending these officers to go and arrest the bad guys. So I'm doing all the legwork. All they have to do is attend and grab the guy. And so it's been very successful. When the pandemic hit on March 16th of 2020, I was able to transition to work from home, and that's where I've been since then. I haven't gone back to the office yet. I miss it dearly. I miss my colleagues and everybody, but luckily I was able to transition to home where I can stay healthy and safe until this COVID pandemic passes and I can return. But yeah, it's been an adventure.
It certainly sounds like it.
Yeah, you bet.